Welcome to the Intellectual Cage Match Podcast, dissecting culture from the only BS worth listening to, hosted by Brian and Steven from outside the cave. Welcome to the Intellectual Cage Match. This is episode 3. Today, I'm Steve.
I'm Brian.
We're the only BS worth listening to. We probably should say Brian and Steve, because then they'd get it better, because we're not SB, we're BS.
BS,
Okay.
Are we testing or are we like live?
This is real.
Oh, never mind then. That answers that.
This episode, brought to you by nothing, because we haven't any sponsors yet.
No.
Is called Ideas Are Contagious, but Truth is Elusive. So what we want to talk about is during this podcast, preparation for this podcast, there's some debates going on. And yes, I painfully watched most of the debates. I had to actually turn it off about a little over 60% of the way in because my mind was about to explode. And the reason is that everyone seems to have ideas. And they measure good ideas not by the logos, but by emotional. So it's really more
infantile?
The pathos. It's always an emotional appeal. They don't go by the logos or the ethos, it's the pathos. It's the emotional appeal of the argument that people do. And it spreads like wildfire because it feels right. And if you notice, if you own the language, you own the argument. And what the left always does in America is they're always trying to own the language. So today what we're going to talk about really is some of the really bad ideas that are being put forth by presidential candidates, and explain why those ideas don't measure up to the logos or the ethos for that matter. So the first one I wanted to talk about, and it's a pretty hot topic right now, and it's controversial, so I'm not sure how you're going to feel about this.
Might make me take up day drinking again?
It might.
Okay.
It might.
Be careful.
As long as diet do.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Yeah.
So it is abortion. So I wanted to talk about it because the idea is that all of the presidential candidates now, at least yesterday,
Publicly stated.
they all
So it's
have
on record.
agreed that they believe in essential abortion all the way up until the birth of a child. And that scares the living hell out of me because it doesn't pass the most simplest biological test. So in the last podcast, we talked about the science is settled, and using that foreign object against the
Yeah. Against the heel.
The
bad
heel?
guy. Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that if you ask any biologist, they can tell you that human life is human life from the moment of conception because the DNA is different than its mother and father. And it actually has potential, and it will grow, and it'll become a human. So we can call it whatever name we want, but we know that it is a human being. We know exactly what it's going to be, okay? And so the argument basically is, the argument that they're putting forth is that I'm pandering to people because they put themselves in a difficult position. They don't want the consequences of their actions. That's what this really comes down to. They don't want to live with the consequence of their actions, and someone's giving them an out and trying to make them feel good about it by saying, it is your body, it is your choice. So that's the big idea, if you will. The big idea. But it doesn't hold water because, you can make any analogy you want. And a lot of people make the analogy of the man in a coma. If a man's in a coma, do I have a right? Do I have to give blood to that person for that guy to survive? But there's a difference. The difference is you didn't put that man in a coma. Okay? You didn't do something to cause that. And actually, one would maybe argue, in fact, it'd be interesting to see an argument for if you actually hit a guy with your car and put him in a coma, and all he could do is live if they transfused your blood. I bet you the court would force you to give him a blood transfusion as restitution for the actions of what you did. So
There's precedence for that. If you kill a pregnant lady, you're convicted on that too.
Well, that's unfortunately going to go away.
Oh,
That's
is
a
it?
part of this,
Oh,
yes,
that's
because they're no longer going to identify that as a human. And you've got states that on the East Coast and West Coast both that are signing into law this idea that, and by the way, Illinois as well, sign up basically killing a child up until the moment that the mother gives birth. And it's devastating. And this is what I heard last night. and this is why I got so upset and I wanted to bring it up today, is one of the people running for president literally said that there are some states denying women their right to choose. Now just stop right there. This country was founded on the idea that the federal government has limited powers and that the states had right to self-determination on most things, on everything outside of
The limited, enumerated.
the enumerated right,
Yeah.
rights or duties of the federal government. And yet this is what a person running for president is saying. And the problem is that you get a lot of people that actually support that idea. So Brian, I've never really talked to you about abortion.
No, you haven't.
But I would like to hear your thoughts on it.
All right.
And I'd like you to think in terms of logos and tell me what your view on this subject is and where do you draw the line?
All right. Micro, macro.
Okay.
Look here. Looking at it from the big standpoint, I just believe because man's fallen and we make mistakes, we can grow from those mistakes. That's why ideas are so important. It's a big part of this podcast. And so, to me, the decision Roe versus Wade, Roe v. Wade, was wrong, and it was a bad idea. I believe in the founding that I'm pro-life, but I do believe that states should be able to choose based on voting. And if Illinois votes to be allow abortion, I don't like it. I can move and try to persuade people with that with a better idea. Mandated is coercion, and it forces people who fundamentally disagree. So on a micro level, I side with people like the economist Julian Simon and George Gilder. I believe that children are a gift. And in the 60 million abortions since 72, I'm wondering if maybe one of them didn't have the cure for cancer. Didn't have the idea. Ideas, again, are so important. So on a micro level, yeah, I'm pro-life. But on a macro level, I think the idea that Roe v. Wade put out there was a flawed idea. In a country, state, and like you brought up, a state does have a right, I believe, even though I'm pro-life, I do believe that a state can choose to be pro-choice, and a state can choose, because I do believe in the power of ideas. And yeah, that's what I believe. So no, we never have talked about that. Yeah.
And I guess what I'll say is, well, first of all, Roe, she's pro-life. She passed away
Yeah,
a
no,
couple
I know,
years ago.
I know.
She really, it's kind of a fake case anyway. There wasn't really.
No.
It was all kind of staged.
It was
and
staged.
the whole idea of the back alley abortions, that was actually a made up thing as well.
Still is, remains so today.
And the guy that
Yeah.
started actually that entire movement converted to Catholicism and renounced abortion and became a very heavy pro-life activist until he passed away as well. So here's my thoughts. And so maybe we have a disagreement on this one, because I think when it comes to fundamental truths,
Tag teams in trouble.
yeah, where it's morality. It's kind of like saying if we decided to, it's called the tyranny of the majority. If the majority of the people decide to say, if your name ends in the letter Z, you can be murdered. And they vote on it and they say, okay, we pass it, right? Or if you are a person of a different color or a race or religion, we can steal from you or take a jizya or a tax or something like that. I think those things are fundamentally immoral. And I think it comes down to this: life, liberty, property. It's the fundamental three natural laws put down. If it takes a life, it's wrong. If it takes someone's freedom, it's wrong. If it takes someone's property, it's wrong. So I always take it right back to the fundamental principles. So to me, it doesn't matter if it's a majority of people or not. It's fundamental truth that I'm looking for in these things. So, topic one, abortion. I come down on the idea that there's fundamental truths in life, and life, liberty, and property. If you can't go back to them and make a good argument why they don't violate those three things, and the irony is that someone will say, well, the woman's liberty is being infringed upon because she's being forced to have a baby. Well, the decision already happened before. The decision was to have an act that results many times in a pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so, to me, it's the same way if a woman wanted to have a baby and the guy who essentially inseminated her demanded that she have an abortion. And the government said, you must have an abortion because he has a right to not have that child. It was his body, his sperm, it's his right. And then they'll say, well, it's silly because she has to carry the baby and he doesn't. But still, the principles are the same. The principles are the same. The only difference is who's actually has the burden of actually carrying the baby, but the man has the burden of taking care of that baby. So that's why I think it doesn't work on a logos level.
Well, in response to that,
Yeah.
I will say I like to call myself an empirical philosopher, which simply means I agree 100% with what you just said philosophically. 100%. Empirically, you can't deny that that was coming to a head to begin with. So you can't say that there was not going to be a Roe versus Wade, because there was. And all I'm saying is that a better outcome, given the reality of the situation, which is not optional, that a better outcome would have been, let's give it to the states to decide. But philosophically, I'm 100% behind you. I think it's an abomination. I don't know how to square the circle. I'm going to be honest with you on that one. I don't.
Well,
But I am with you.
To change culture, you have to change behavior.
That's
you have to
what.
change the way people
That's
think.
right. But
And it comes back to me, the fundamental idea of is if you're not a moral and virtuous people, you are not going to be successful as a culture.
But what I worry about when we talk about is if you were pro-choice and you didn't, you would feel the same way as the pro-life people if it was reversed. And that's why I think changing behavior is so important. And that's why I believe ideas, given the platform to teach people, and take a look at, like you said, the Roe and what was the other guy that they came around. Why did they come around?
Nathan, what was his name?
Yeah,
Dr.
why did they come around?
Yeah.
Because they were exposed to a better idea.
Yeah.
No, I know it's tough.
Red pill moment, and if you haven't seen Unplanned, you need to go see.
Yeah, I
that
do need to
movie.
go see that. I will see.
It's a movie that if you have the courage to go see it, it should if you have any, because it hits the logos, ethos, and the pathos. Hits all three. It says if you don't have a heart, if you don't have a mind, if you don't have a soul, I mean, it's really hard for me to understand. And I get the pain, and no one's trying to ever shame anybody, because that's not the point. The point is to save a life.
I agree.
That's where I'm at.
I am 100% behind you.
So point two, since we're on this topic of the micro and macro, I'd like to talk a little bit about the idea of immigration. And that essentially in the debate last night, to the T, every single candidate doesn't say what they really mean, but simply describe what they mean. And that is, they all are for open borders.
Yeah.
When all your pandering is about the poor children on the border in cages, giving no thought to how they got there in the first place and from where they came, trail back, right? It seems disingenuous. And I think it's the same thing I have with the abortion debate. It's not about right now, it's about how you got there. When someone commits a murder, how do they convict someone of murder? They need two things.
Motive.
Exactly. Thank you. All right. It's motive.
Yeah.
You need motive.
Mm-hmm.
And so
An opportunity.
the means and the motive. That's
Yeah.
right. That's exactly right. It's the two M's. And so you have to decide, okay, what is behind all of this? And the bottom line is I'm actually for massive amounts of immigration. In fact, the United States has let more legal immigrants into this country in the last 10 years than all other countries in the world combined. How about that statistic?
But it's always been true. It's always pretty much been true. You're
So-
exactly right. We haven't changed. That's
So the
United
problem
States, yeah.
is that we've got somewhere between probably 15 to 20 million, and I've heard the 12 people talk about 12. That's just total BS, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, because all you have to do is you have to look at what they statistically say there is, and then you just have to drive through different towns, and you can say, okay, there's something fundamentally different now than there was before. And I guess my point is, I want to get your thoughts on this, of where do you draw the line on immigration?
Again, a country has to have rules, and so I'm all for as long as we agree on the rules.
But what if we don't agree on the rules?
Well, my point is, if you're saying,
Yeah.
again, remember the foreign object from the last time? I said, if you can pick and choose your rules, then I get to pick and choose my rules.
Right.
So I don't want to hear you whining and complaining, when I make, a state concealed carry, and only open to certain people. You can't see, to me, it's not a problem with immigration, it's a problem with rules. They cloud the issue by saying, a straw man, by saying I'm anti-immigrant. That's how I got here, that's how our families got here. I'm not anti-immigrant at all. I'm saying that we either have rules or we don't. And when one side says there should be no rules,
Yeah.
if that's the bar we're going with, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't want to hear you bitching when I take away other rules that
Yeah.
make, that benefit me. So that's
Yeah.
where I stand on that.
So I'd like to know where are you at? How many people should be allowed in, and what are the criteria for letting people in?
Well, I go back to I honor our past. And we had it figured out pretty well. We assimilated people. We let enough people in. Then we actually took a break from about, the 20s until the 60s. We took a break. Why? Not because we hated immigrants, because we wanted to give them the opportunity to assimilate and become Americans. People say we're multiracial. We're not. We're multiracial, but we're monocultural. And that's what makes America great. And so I don't care how many immigrants actually come in, but they come in with the idea of becoming, Americans and adhering to our culture and following the rules,
Yep.
And if you don't like that, I'd like to play poker with you, and I'll make up my own rules, and we'll see how that goes. But
So, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in my church that are not following the true teachings of our church when it comes to immigration. St. Thomas Aquinas, I think, has the absolute best solution for
what does Tommy
immigration.
say?
Tommy says, St. Tommy says that
Uh-oh.
there are two types of visitors. Okay? The first type of visitor is the one that's essentially traveling through your country. They're coming in to visit, to do business, or to pass through. And it is the obligation and duty of the host country to welcome them, to allow them to conduct themselves as long as they follow the laws of your country, and to treat them with hospitality. Then there's the second visitor. And the second visitor is the one who wishes to come and immigrate to your country. And St. Thomas says that in order to do that, that person must respect and adapt to the norms, standards, and culture of the country they're going to.
Sounds like
And
a no-brainer.
I think that a guy who was much smarter than me
I think so.
figured it out a long time ago. So I fall back on the simple philosophy that, one, follow the rules.
Yeah.
Two, if you're going to come, you must do it the legal way. You must adopt the culture, laws, and customs of our country, which includes our language. If you do that, I have no issue whatsoever with that. But the idea goes back to the contagious idea is that you're anti-immigrant, right?
Yeah, I know.
You're an
It's
anti.
sad.
You're
Yeah.
a xenophobe.
Yeah.
And the idea is that if I bring in enough people and pander to them, I have got power forever.
Yeah.
This goes back to my fear again, and why I'm not a fan of democracy at all, because ultimately democracy is the tyranny of the majority.
Yeah.
And if you can give enough people some bread, you're power for life.
Yeah.
And I just like to remind people that several tyrannical people in this world who were in power for decades were duly elected. So it's not necessarily they're dictators. There are several that have been duly elected for essentially life. And then people say, well, the election was fraud. I'm not sure it always is.
Yeah, I'm not sure it always is either.
I'm thinking that a lot of times it's
Yeah.
okay because, they're giving you a little bread and a little bit of this and that. And we're better than that other guy. So that was the second idea. So the third big idea is healthcare.
Yeah.
And essentially you have two camps. This is where we finally have some disagreement. Although I'm not sure we really do.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But the disagreement really is that there are those that are for universal health care that's government run, Medicaid, Medicare for all, Bernie Sanders stuff. And then there's those that want to have universal health care, Medicare for all, except those that already have insurance, which actually is a more disingenuous position. Because if you didn't have to pay for your health care, why would you keep your private insurance plan where you're paying through the nose?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
So
Mental
anyway,
midget.
the idea is that healthcare is a fundamental human right.
Yeah.
So earlier I was talking about life, liberty, property, trying to figure out, well, healthcare fits in there. And I think you might have something to say about this because I think we talked about this a little earlier about what makes up a right. And you were talking about you can't really have a right if you're basically
Coerced into it.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're done.
How do you have universal
Yeah.
health care without coercing people into it?
Yeah.
Like doctors, nurses, hospitals,
The moment
pharmaceutical.
coercion, you don't have freedom, and yeah, that's
Right.
again. But to me, when we talk about healthcare, if we get lost in the branches and the leaves, we'll never get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is third-party payers. We're not dealing directly with people that supply. So there's no there's no room for creation, new ideas, and things like that.
Yep.
So yeah, I go back to the idea of having third-party payers is a flawed idea, and as you can see, bad ideas lead to bad institutions, lead to bad outcomes. So I go back. We got to find a way somehow to slowly move out of third-party payer
And
institution.
Who did that, I wonder?
No, the government did during World War II.
Yeah.
Because of they instituted wage freezes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Trying to remember who was running the government back then.
I don't know, little d, 50.
And then there was this backdoor deal back in the 70s between Tip O'Neill and Nixon. So maybe the Republicans take a little bit when they did the old HMO to really divert all the costs on the.
They couldn't have done an HMO without the initiation. of
No,
the whole
you're right.
process,
One starts. It's that slippery
Yeah.
slope thing.
It is.
again,
That's
isn't
my
it?
that's my whole point. It's
Yeah.
what level of coercion
Yeah.
are you willing to live
Yeah,
under?
and it keeps inching forward. I think that's the Overton window, right?
I know what that is. A moment in time when everything comes together. Yep.
Yeah. So
A
okay.
moment in time when ideas become profitable,
So
possible.
We're kind of at towards the end here, and I only got
What?
into 3 ideas. I
Leg
know.
day tomorrow.
It's leg day. It's leg day.
I gotta go.
Actually, my calves are killing me. I can't do leg day. I walked 25,000 steps 2 days ago, and I'm telling you, my calves are killing me.
Hey, listen, I don't want to hear it if you haven't squatted, baby. If you don't get under the bar, you're not a man.
I had to bend over twice.
Okay,
so,
well, there
know.
you go. You got that going for you.
So I just want to leave with one thought, and that is what Benjamin Franklin was quoted as saying, and who knows how accurate it is, but it's certainly been passed around for a couple hundred years, and that is those who give up essential liberty to personal temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Excuse me. And I think that sums up these ideas that people are willing to give up a little bit of liberty, the coercion, for a little bit of safety, whether it's economic safety, health safety, the idea that they're willing to open up their borders because they want a virtue signal and say, we can do this, we can anything's possible, right? But the problem is the ending result is a definite impact on the culture and on the economics of a country. And I think you've said this before, and I've heard this a lot, is that there is no such thing as equal culture. There are cultures in this world that have thrived and many that have self-destructed. And we've been blessed, and you talk about gratitude on this podcast.
Always start the day.
What gratitude of our great-great-grandfathers, great-great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers and mothers, families that came to this country and adopted this culture and not the culture they had in Ireland, Denmark, Germany.
That's why they left.
Africa, wherever. Because
Existential.
it was exactly right. It was not good. And this was the promised land. And we've been blessed, grateful. But unfortunately, if we don't do something, and you quoted a gentleman on podcast 1 who's a paleoconservative, and they always get this big bad rap that they're like these white supremacist people, which is just not true. But that's how you do. You paint people as a Nazi, as a white supremacist, as something bad, and then you can dismiss them,
Yeah.
right? But ultimately, the idea of preservation of culture, of the American culture, and the irony is that in a future podcast, I do want to talk about this. I want to talk about the African American culture between essentially 1900 and 1959, because it was very different than the culture today.
Very few peoples have ever advanced faster and quicker in a moment in time than one generation out of slavery.
And you'll be good at this because Thomas Sowell
I'm a soul.
talks a lot about this.
Praise be He.
Praise be He. So that's it. Brian, any last words?
Leg day.
Leg day.
Yeah.
All
Gotta
right.
go.
All right. Well, hey, wasn't that leg day yesterday? Because you said that last podcast.
Did I? I
You
do
did
legs
leg
a
day
lot.
every day.
Yeah, I do legs a lot. Well, you
Okay.
have to when you're injecting steroids.
Maybe is that just your sign off leg day?
Yeah, it is.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Just ruin that for me.
See, I was TCC, total chest cavity.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember, man. Bench press. We can do today.
Yeah,
bench.
bench.
We can do tomorrow.
Bench.
Yeah.
I do curls once in a
Yeah.
while. Yeah.
Curls for the girls.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, this is Steve. That's Brian.
Hi.
Thank you very much for watching. Please hit the like button. And if you have any questions or thoughts, please comment below. And we're happy to bring up some of those topics on later podcasts.
Dress him to Steve because I'll be squatting.
That's true. All right, guys. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.